Hi sculptors. In this video we're going to discuss your final project. Can you believe it? We're already here. It's going to be a wearable found materials sculpture. So this whole quarter we've been discussing the principles of design and specifically how they relate to 3D design and sculpture. For this final project, you're going to choose to focus on 3 of these. So from the 9 that we've studied, balance, repetition and rhythm, movement, occupied and unoccupied space, time, unity and variety, contrast, proportion and scale, and emphasis, you're going to choose 3 of those that your sculpture will really focus on. Now, as you know, the principles of design overlap, and so you might use more than those, but you really want to think about the ones that you are going to focus and make dominant in your sculpture. For example, look at the helmet on the right. First of all, do you notice what materials it's made out of? I think it's made out of poster board, so something really, really common. But which 3 principles of design do you think stand out the most in that sculpture? When I look at the sculpture, I see balance because there's a strong symmetrical composition to the way that the parts of the helmet are arranged, especially with that line going down the middle of the head. I also see repetition because these strips of poster board, I don't know what to call that part of the helmet, but it's repeated over and over again. And maybe rhythm a little bit too because there is that difference in each one of those parts. And then I also see unity with the shape, how the sculptor has used the plane, the flat surface of the rectangle of the poster board, and then kept the color consistent throughout the whole sculpture. So you can take a look at each one of these examples and think about which 3 principles of design really stand out the most in each sculpture, and which principles have you been drawn to, whether it's contrast or repetition or a certain type of balance or movement or creating a focal point with emphasis. Which principles have you been drawn to and how will you use those in your final? Second thing you want to think about is the manipulation of found materials. We're going to continue using these everyday objects that we have around the house, but I really want you to think about how you can control, change, and transform those objects, not necessarily just stack them or use them as they are. So here's some different ways that you can manipulate. You can see all of those different verbs that you can use between cutting, rolling, painting, gluing, attaching, combining, sewing or weaving, or any other way of transforming the material. And I want you to think back to Tara Donovan. She took those simple styrofoam cups and just by using repetition, transformed them into these really overwhelming or these really awe-inspiring installations that we can still recognize the found material, but it's been transformed or it's transcended its physicality is the phrase that artists would use. It's become something more than what it started out as. So you can see here at the bottom, what you don't want to do is take something, cut a hole in it, and stick it on someone's head, like the Tide box. That is not manipulation of materials. That doesn't transform that box at all. But you see over on the 2 on the right, we can definitely recognize the materials. The headdress or hat is clear plastic water bottles that have been cut and then transformed into these beautiful flowers. And of course, the dress is just paper plates that have been cut. But that use of occupied and unoccupied space makes this beautiful, lovely dress out of that found material. Types of wearable sculpture, anything that you could put on someone's body or that they could carry. So we've got on the head, on the face, around your neck or shoulders, on your body, or you can even make accessories. So you'll see lots of examples of this. If you have another idea, you might want to check with your teacher, but I'm just going to say go for it. Anything that can be displayed on a person. Make sure you read through the project handout, but these are the basic requirements for the project. It needs to be wearable or placed on a figure. It can be small or large. You need to use and manipulate found materials. Remember, it needs to be a three-dimensional sculpture, not something that's just flat. You need to incorporate 3 principles of design. We're going to teach you how to photograph the sculpture on a person in front of a really simple background to make your sculpture stand out. You need to expect to spend 3 to 4 hours creating your sculpture. We're spending almost 2 weeks on this project. There's 4 different class sessions. And so you need to take your time, and this includes time sketching, planning, building, and photographing your artwork. But it is a significant project. It is not a mini sculpture. It is your final. It's worth 10% of your overall semester grade. So you need to invest your time in it. And then finally, it must be 100% your idea and creation. And we'll talk a little bit more about plagiarism in just a moment. So here's some examples. I just grouped them by loose categories to give you some ideas. You can go back and look at these either in this video, or you can click the link to view this PowerPoint to look really closely. And again, I want you to go back and think about how have these artists used the principles of design? Where do you see contrast? We see a lot of repetition, but where do you see balance? Where do you see movement? I see movement especially in the red flower headdress on the lower left and in the one on the lower right that looks like a hat going in front of the woman's face. So think about each one of those principles and how you could use that in your sculpture. Here's some masks. Different than the mask that we might be wearing every day, but you could consider a different type of artistic mask that might serve the same purpose. Different types of jewelry, either in the form of necklaces or could be in the form of earrings or armbands or even rings or other decorative things that remain to go on the body. Helmets and armor. I really love the manipulation of the CDs and the artwork on the lower left. Again, recognizable material, but completely transformed into something new. Looks like these iridescent scales that are going to protect the wearer. This is a little more challenging category, I think, just because of its size and then also the construction around someone's body. But if this interests you, you could make a dress, a skirt, or even a jacket. You'll see there's a whole series of artworks on the right that were all made out of cardstock and cardboard to make different wearable type sculptures. And then finally, handbags or shoes or something that could be carried or worn on the body as well. So any of those categories, you choose the one that inspires you the most. So now that I've shown you all of these examples, I want to talk just a little bit about plagiarism and artistic integrity. Your design and sculpture must be 100% your idea and creation. That doesn't mean that you can't get inspiration from some of these examples or take a look at how they've used the principles and use a principle in a similar way. However, you may not copy an example. You have to transform your inspirations and create something new. So that means just making a lot of changes. It might be looking at a lot of different examples and putting them together, taking what you like out of multiple inspirations and combining them together. And you see here at the bottom some examples of unacceptable plagiarism. And some are sculptural and some are more fashion oriented. But just making one change, like changing the color, as you see on the lower left, is not enough. That is the same materials, that's the same use of a principle, the movement, the same use of variety and transition from one color to the other. So that's really not acceptable. That would be considered plagiarism. In the middle, this is actually a fashion designer who was sued by an artist for copying her designs. And you can see these dresses are different. There are changes. There's changes in the silhouette or the form, but really they are so close that that designer was sued for plagiarism. So that's not something you want to do either. And on the lower right, you see these shoes that have been painted. And actually, the plagiarized design, I think, is a better design. It has a nicer background. It's got more detail. But that's still not okay because it is a direct copy of the main of the original design, which was the Bear brand shoes. So keep those things in mind. You've got some tips here. Again, combine multiple ideas. And then at some point, put away the examples and come up with your own ideas. And if you're struggling, if you think your design is too close to an example, just ask your teacher for help. We will gladly help you transform that into your own original work. And just so you know, plagiarized designs do result in a 0% F on the final and referral to the Success Center. So make sure you avoid that at all costs. All right, today's exercise is to start brainstorming and sketching. So you can download the handout and it'll guide you through these 4 questions. You want to think about what materials are you going to use? What type of sculpture are you going to make? How are you going to manipulate those materials? And which principles will you focus on? So you can take a picture of your materials as you gather them. And then on the handout, there's a mannequin where you can actually draw on top of the mannequin to help you show how it's going to be wearable. So we look forward to seeing your sketches and to working on this project with you.